The Perseverance wasn't much to look at. Her hull bore the scars of 30 years hauling cargo through the outer colonies, and her paint had long since faded to a patchy gray that matched her captain's hair. But Sarah Chen didn't care what her ship looked like. She cared that it worked. And work it did, through a combination of mechanical ingenuity, careful maintenance, and what her engineer Marcus called the pure stubbornness of old tech. They were 3 days out from New Singapore colony when the first warnings came. Sarah was in the engine room with Marcus, helping him replace a mechanical fuel pump, the kind that newer ships hadn't used in decades. The emergency comm system crackled to life with Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice from the bridge. "Captain, we're picking up massive energy signatures, like nothing I've ever seen before." Sarah exchanged glances with Marcus, noting how his dark hand stilled on the wrench he was holding. "On my way," she replied, already moving toward the ladder. "What's our status?" "All systems nominal," Rodriguez reported. "But these readings, they're getting stronger. Whatever's out there, it's big, and there's a lot of them." By the time Sarah reached the bridge, the situation had become clear, horrifyingly so. The main view screen showed dozens of ships emerging from hyperspace, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly iridescence that made them look like giant soap bubbles in space. Each one was easily 10 times the size of the Perseverance. "First contact," whispered Dr. Emily Wong from her science station. "They're definitely not human designs." As if in response to her words, every screen on the bridge lit up with the same message, translated into perfect standard English. "Attention inferior vessels. The Ascended have arrived to claim this sector. Your primitive technology marks you as unworthy of resistance. Submit to our guidance, and you may continue your simple existence under our benevolent direction." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. She'd spent her entire life being told her ship was outdated, that she needed to upgrade to modern AI systems and quantum drives. But the Perseverance had survived pirates, solar storms, and worse, precisely because she relied on tried and true technology that any skilled engineer could fix with basic tools. "What's their heading?" she asked Rodriguez, who was studying the tactical display. "They're moving toward the colony cluster, New Singapore, Nova Lisboa, and the Armstrong settlements. 7 million civilians, minimum." He looked up, his face pale. "They're not even trying to hide their approach, like they don't think we're worth the effort of being subtle." Sarah watched the alien armada's graceful movement through space. Their ships were beautiful, yes, but there was something almost artificial about that beauty. Too perfect, too clean. She thought about the Perseverance's engine room, with its mixture of mechanical governors and basic computer systems, its redundant manual backups for every critical system. "Emily, what can you tell me about their tech level?" The scientist adjusted her glasses, studying her readings. "It's incredibly advanced. Quantum computing arrays, synthetic intelligence cores, zero-point energy. They're at least a century ahead of our most advanced ships." But, she frowned, "there's something odd. They're not using any mechanical systems at all. Everything's digital. Everything's networked. Everything's vulnerable," Marcus added from the engineering station, where he'd just arrived. "Cap, remember that solar flare last year? How we survived it because we could switch to manual controls, while all those fancy new ships got their systems fried." Sarah felt a smile starting to form, the kind of smile that had preceded some of the Perseverance's most unlikely successes. "They think we're primitive because we still use physical switches and mechanical backups, because our AI systems are basic, because we can't match their technological sophistication." She looked around at her crew. Rodriguez with his old-school tactical training, Emily with her passion for understanding alien technology, Marcus with his genius for keeping obsolete systems running. They weren't the most advanced crew in space, but they were resourceful, adaptable, human. "They're not the first to underestimate us," Sarah said, settling into her command chair. "And like all the others, they're about to learn that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology. It's our ability to use whatever tools we have at hand. She pressed the ship-wide comm button. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to do something incredibly stupid or incredibly brilliant, possibly both. We're going to show these ascended that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Battle stations, everyone. Let's show them what primitive really means. The Perseverance's engines hummed to life, not with the silent efficiency of modern drives, but with the deep mechanical rumble that had become music to Sarah's ears over the years. Ahead of them, the alien fleet continued its majestic advance, paying no attention to the battered cargo ship that was about to become their worst nightmare. "They're not even looking at us," Rodriguez reported from Tactical, his voice a mixture of disbelief and growing excitement. The Perseverance had been shadowing the alien fleet for 6 hours, maintaining a careful distance while collecting data. The massive ships continued their stately progress toward the colonies, their sensor sweeps passing over the cargo vessel as if it were nothing more than space debris. Marcus emerged from the access tunnel, his coveralls stained with grease. "You need to see this, Cap," he said, waving a handheld diagnostic tool, the kind that hadn't been updated in 15 years. "I've been analyzing their communication patterns. They're using quantum entanglement for instant messaging across their fleet. But there's a catch." Sarah moved to his station as he plugged the device into a display port. The screen filled with cascading data patterns that would have been incomprehensible to most modern ships' AI systems. But the Perseverance's computers were simple enough to display raw data without trying to interpret it. "Look at these gaps," Marcus continued, pointing to rhythmic interruptions in the pattern. "Every 18 minutes, their entire network resets, probably to prevent quantum decoherence. For about 3 seconds, they fall back on conventional transmissions." Dr. Wong leaned in, her eyes widening. "Those conventional signals, they're using standard protocols. Advanced ones, but still based on the same principles we use. During those resets, their entire fleet is linked through normal space communication. Which means they're vulnerable." Sarah finished, the pieces falling into place. "For 3 seconds every 18 minutes, their fancy quantum network goes dark, and they're using the same kind of transmissions as us primitive humans." Rodriguez looked up from his station. "Cap, I've been running simulations. If we could inject our own signals during that reset window." He trailed off, letting the implications hang in the air. Sarah felt that familiar surge of anticipation, the feeling that had carried them through countless impossible situations before. "Marcus, what's the status of that old electronic warfare package you salvaged from that decommissioned destroyer?" The engineer grinned, still sitting in Cargo Bay 3. "Never did get around to scrapping it like command ordered. Too well built to throw away." "Emily, how long would it take you to analyze their command protocols? Figure out how to speak their language?" The scientist was already typing. "With modern encryption, it'd take years. But they're not bothering to encrypt their reset transmissions. Why would they? We're too primitive to intercept them, right?" Her sarcasm was evident. "Give me 3 hours." Sarah nodded, then turned to Rodriguez. "What about those mining charges we're supposed to be delivering to Nova Lisboa? The ones with the mechanical detonators?" 36 units in the hold. Old-style fusion bombs. Nothing fancy, just brute force and radiation. He paused. They'd never see them coming. Their sensors are calibrated for quantum signatures and energy weapons, not primitive chemical triggers. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Perfect. Here's what we're going to do." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Emily worked on cracking the alien communication protocols while Marcus and his engineering team modified the mining charges, replacing their industrial detonators with even more primitive radio-triggered systems. Rodriguez calculated optimal firing positions, using trigonometry and basic physics instead of relying on advanced targeting computers. The Perseverance herself was transformed. They shut down every system that might register on advanced sensors, leaving only the most basic life support and manual controls running. Without their modern systems, the ship was nearly invisible to the alien fleet's sophisticated detection equipment. They simply weren't looking for anything so basic. Status report, Sarah called out as the final preparations were made. Communications ready, Emily responded. I can mimic their command protocols. During the reset window, we'll have about 2 seconds to transmit before their quantum network reestablishes. Charges modified and loaded in the emergency deployment tubes, Marcus added. Timers set to the reset window. Old-school clockwork, no electronics to detect. Course plotted, Rodriguez confirmed. Using stellar navigation and Mark I eyeballs, just like the old days. Sarah took a deep breath, looking at the alien fleet through the view screen. Their ship still moved with that same graceful arrogance, their crews probably never imagining that the primitive vessel they'd dismissed could pose any threat. They hadn't bothered to notice that the Perseverance had gradually maneuvered into position near their formation's rear, positioning herself perfectly for what was to come. They called us primitive, Sarah said quietly. They looked at our mechanical systems, our basic computers, our crude weapons, and saw them as weaknesses. She straightened in her chair. Time to show them that sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective. All hands, prepare for combat maneuvers. Let's remind these ascended that humanity didn't get to the stars by giving up when someone called us inferior. The Perseverance's engines thrummed to life. The sound barely more than a whisper. Ahead of them, the alien fleet continued its advance, unaware that their greatest weakness was about to be exploited by the very primitives they'd dismissed. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. The bridge of the Perseverance was silent except for the soft ticking of Marcus's mechanical countdown timer. Sarah watched the seconds slip away, knowing that timing would be everything. They had one shot at this. The moment they acted, they'd lose the element of surprise that was their only real advantage. Reset window in 30 seconds, Emily announced, her fingers hovering over her modified communications console. The alien fleet filled their view screen, their ships still moving in perfect formation, their quantum networks humming with data they thought no primitive species could possibly intercept. Charges armed, Rodriguez reported. Manual targeting solutions locked in. He'd sketched the firing trajectories on actual paper, using geometry and instinct rather than computer assistance. The alien vessel's predictable movement patterns made them surprisingly vulnerable to such basic calculations. 20 seconds, Marcus called out. Engineering reports all non-essential systems dark. We're running on backup power and mechanical controls only. The ship felt different under these conditions, more alive somehow, each creak and groan of her hull telling a story that no automated system could interpret. Sarah took a deep breath. Remember, we only get one chance at this. The moment we act, they'll realize their mistake in dismissing us. Make it count. 10 seconds. The alien fleet continued their stately advance, their complex quantum networks preparing for another routine reset. They had no reason to fear this moment of vulnerability. After all, what primitive species could possibly take advantage of such a brief window? 5 seconds. Sarah gripped her chair's arms. Emily, start your transmission the moment their network drops. Rodriguez, deploy charges on my mark. Marcus, be ready with the engine modifications. 3, 2, 1. The quantum network reset rippled through the alien fleet like a wave of invisible static. For 3 precious seconds, their sophisticated ships would rely on conventional communications, and in that brief window, humanity would show them the true meaning of primitive warfare. Now, Emily's fingers flew across her console, injecting their carefully crafted signal into the alien fleet's backup communication network. It was a simple command by their standards, practically binary code compared to their quantum algorithms. But its very simplicity made it impossible for their systems to recognize as a threat. The signal raced through their formation. Emergency protocol initiated. HFY radiation shielding at maximum power. The alien ships responded instantly, their automated systems recognizing the command format and executing it without question. Their energy shields shifted configuration, preparing to block a radiation threat that didn't yet exist. Shields realigning. Rodriguez confirmed. Deploying charges. Now. The mining charges shot out from the Perseverance's emergency tubes, their primitive radio detonators completely invisible to the aliens' sophisticated sensors. They were simple fusion devices, the kind used to crack asteroids for mining. Crude but devastatingly effective when used properly. Charges in position, Rodriguez reported. Detonation in 3, 2, 1. The explosions weren't particularly large by modern standards, but they didn't need to be. Each blast released a carefully calculated pulse of radiation, not enough to breach the alien ship shields, but more than enough to overload them while they were configured at maximum sensitivity. The effect was devastating. Shield generators across the alien fleet burned out simultaneously, overloaded by their own protective protocols. Secondary systems tried to compensate, but the damage was done. Their perfect formation began to break apart as ships lost power and control. Multiple targets showing critical system failures, Rodriguez reported, unable to keep the triumph from his voice. Their automated responses are going haywire. Looks like their AI can't handle unexpected shield failures. Emily, status of their communications. Quantum network is trying to reestablish, but their conventional systems are flooded with error messages. They can't coordinate effectively. Marcus's voice came over the intercom from engineering. Cap, I'm reading massive power fluctuations from their engines. Their control systems are cascading, one failure triggering another. It's like watching a house of cards collapse. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. Send the signal to the colonies. Tell them what we've learned about their weaknesses. The Ascended are about to discover that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology. It's our ability to use whatever tools we have, no matter how primitive they might seem. The alien fleet's perfect formation had deteriorated into chaos. Their ships, so graceful and sophisticated moments ago, now moved erratically as their crews struggled with systems that had never been designed to operate without full automation. Some vessels were going dark, their quantum cores shutting down to prevent catastrophic failures. Others were trying to restore their shields, but without coordination, they were only making things worse. They're falling back, Rodriguez announced. Multiple ships breaking formation. Some are engaging emergency FTL drives. Sarah nodded. Let them run. Let them tell their leaders how a single primitive cargo ship showed them the true meaning of technological advancement. She turned to her crew. It's not about having the most sophisticated tools. It's about understanding how to use what you have. The Perseverance's engines hummed steadily as they watched the alien fleet retreat, their perfect vessels now scared and humbled by the very primitives they'd dismissed. It wasn't a final victory. Sarah knew they'd be back, and next time they wouldn't underestimate humanity's older ships. But that was fine. Humanity had shown that they could stand against even the most advanced adversaries. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and the Ascended had just learned that lesson the hard way. News of the Perseverance's victory spread through human space like wildfire, transmitted through old radio frequencies and analog channels that the Ascended's quantum networks couldn't monitor. Sarah watched from the bridge as her ship's sensor displays lit up with dozens of incoming messages from other vessels, mostly older ships like hers, the ones that had been marked for decommissioning or relegated to backup duty. Message from the Eclipse, Emily announced, referring to another aging cargo hauler. Captain Rivera says they've already modified their systems based on our encounter data. They're stripping out their AI upgrades and returning to manual controls. The Horizon's Pride reports similar modifications, Rodriguez added. Their engineer apparently kept all their old mechanical systems in storage. Said he never trusted the new automated ones. Marcus emerged from the engine room, his face streaked with grease but wearing a broad grin. You should see the comm channels, Cap. Every independent operator and Colonial Defense Force is digging out their mothballed ships. The ones the bureaucrats said were too outdated to be useful. Sarah nodded, studying the tactical display where friendly signals were multiplying by the hour. The Ascended made a critical mistake. They assumed that technological advancement only moves in one direction. Always newer, always more sophisticated. They never considered that sometimes the best solution is the one that stood the test of time. The bridge crew watched as another cluster of signals appeared. The new Gibraltar Defense Fleet, recommissioning a squadron of obsolete patrol vessels. Their commander's message was brief, but clear. Sometimes the old dogs bite hardest. Multiple colonial governors requesting our tactical data, Emily reported. They're converting their automated defense systems back to manual control. New Singapore's already replaced their quantum communication array with old-style radio relays. Smart, Marcus commented. Can't hack what isn't connected to a network. The Ascended's quantum tech is amazing, but it's also their weakness. They've forgotten how to function without it. A priority signal cut through their discussions, a transmission from the Stellar Defense Command. Sarah straightened in her chair as Admiral Chen's hologram appeared above the bridge's central console. The Admiral's expression was a mixture of pride and determination. Captain Chen, he began, your encounter with the Ascended Fleet has given us something we desperately needed, hope and a strategy. The hologram flickered as he gestured to someone off-screen. We're implementing what we're calling Operation Retrograde. Every ship in the fleet is being given a choice: maintain their current configuration or revert to older, proven systems. Sarah raised an eyebrow. A choice, sir. The Admiral's smile was grim. We've learned from your example, Captain. Uniformity is a weakness. The Ascended expect us to all use the same technology, to follow the same patterns they do. By maintaining a mix of old and new, we become unpredictable. Some ships with quantum cores, others with mechanical backups. Some using AI targeting, others relying on human intuition. Like a battlefield where every soldier uses a different weapon, Rodriguez mused. They can't plan for what they can't predict. Exactly, the Admiral confirmed. We're also reactivating every mothballed ship we can find. The Ascended dismissed them as primitive. Let's show them how dangerous primitive can be when wielded by those who understand its strengths. New signals continued to appear on their tactical display. Ships emerging from retirement, colonies adapting their defenses, commanders implementing strategies that would have been considered obsolete just days ago. Humanity wasn't just preparing for battle, they were rediscovering the value of their heritage. Sir, Sarah said, the Ascended will return. And next time, they won't underestimate us. No, they won't, the Admiral agreed. But that's not necessarily an advantage for them. They'll hesitate now, second-guess themselves, wonder what other surprises we primitive humans might have waiting. And while they're wondering, he smiled, we'll be ready. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew to contemplate the changes sweeping through human space. Their victory hadn't just been about surviving an encounter with superior technology. It had reminded humanity that true advancement wasn't about blindly embracing the new, but about understanding and using every tool at their disposal. New contact, Rodriguez announced suddenly. Multiple signals at the edge of our sensor range. Different configuration than before, but definitely Ascended ships. Sarah settled into her command chair, feeling the familiar vibration of the Perseverance's mechanical systems through its frame. Around them, other ships were already moving to intercept, some new, some old, each choosing their own approach to the coming battle. Let them come, she said quietly. This time, we're ready for them. And this time, they know it. The Perseverance's engines rumbled to life, joining a growing fleet of vessels that represented humanity's true strength. Not just their technology, but their adaptability, their diversity, and their unwavering determination to survive. The combined human fleet was unlike anything space had ever seen. Sleek modern warships flew alongside retired patrol vessels. Cargo haulers turned combat ships moved in formation with colonial defense craft. Each vessel had been modified in its own unique way. some maintaining their quantum cores while adding mechanical backups, others stripped down to purely analog systems. No two ships were exactly alike, and that was their greatest strength. From the Perseverance's bridge, Sarah watched as the ascended fleet approached. Their ships were even more impressive than before. Larger, more numerous, their hulls gleaming with enhanced energy shields and what appeared to be new weapon systems. They've adapted, Rodriguez noted from Tactical, scanning multiple redundant shield frequencies, distributed quantum networks. They're trying to prevent what we did last time. Expected, Sarah replied. But they're still thinking like the Ascended, assuming that more advanced technology is always the answer. The alien fleet's formation was different too. Instead of their previous arrogant advance, they moved with careful precision, constantly scanning for threats. Their command broadcasts echoed through space, no longer dismissive but wary. Surrender your vessels and submit to technological uplift. Resistance will result in your destruction. This is your only warning. Emily looked up from her communication station. They're trying to jam every frequency they can detect, but they're missing the ones they consider too primitive to matter. How many ships are we tracking? Sarah asked. 327 ascended vessels, Rodriguez reported, against our 212. But our fleet's got something they don't understand. Variety. The human fleet's response to the Ascended's demand came not as a unified transmission, but as a cascade of signals across multiple frequencies. Old-style radio, laser communications, even signal lamps flashing between ships. Each vessel or group chose their own way to send the same message. No. The battle began without warning. The Ascended fleet launched a coordinated strike, their weapons blazing with energy that could have vaporized any ship in the human fleet. But humanity had learned from the Perseverance's example. You couldn't hit what you couldn't predict. Modern human warships absorbed the attacks with advanced shields, while their older companions used simple maneuvers and mechanical countermeasures. Colonial defense ships deployed clouds of metallic chaff, a centuries-old technique that played havoc with the Ascended's targeting systems. Cargo haulers turned their industrial equipment into improvised weapons, using mining lasers and magnetic grapples in ways their designers had never intended. Multiple Ascended vessels showing shield fluctuations, Rodriguez called out. Their adaptive systems can't cope with all the different attack types. They're trying to establish a pattern that doesn't exist. Sarah nodded grimly. That's the beauty of it. They keep looking for the optimal solution, the perfect defense. But there isn't one. Every time they adapt to one threat, they make themselves vulnerable to three others. The space around them had become a chaos of light and shadow. A retired mining ship used its excavation beams to overload an Ascended cruiser's shields. A modern destroyer's quantum weapons struck simultaneously with an ancient patrol boat's ballistic missiles, the combination overwhelming defenses calibrated for one threat or the other, but not both. Message from Admiral Chen, Emily announced. The Ascended fleet's coordination is breaking down. Their quantum network can't handle the variety of threats. Individual ships are starting to act independently. And that's what they fear most, Sarah said quietly. Being forced to think for themselves instead of relying on their technology to make decisions. The battle reached its turning point when a group of civilian ships, led by the Eclipse, their old friend from the outer colonies, executed a maneuver that would have been impossible for any modern AI to calculate. They deliberately flew their ships into an unstable formation, using the chaos of their own gravitational interactions to create a weapon that no quantum computer could predict. The Ascended fleet's formation broke. Ships began retreating individually, their perfect coordination shattered by the impossibility of calculating optimal responses to humanity's unpredictable tactics. Their remaining vessels tried to maintain some semblance of order, but it was already too late. They're running, Rodriguez announced, his voice filled with quiet triumph. Multiple ships engaging FTL drives. Others are. They're actually surrendering, Cap. 3 Ascended vessels just powered down their weapons. Sarah stood at her command station, watching as the mighty alien fleet dissolved into retreat. They had come expecting to face primitive technology, only to discover that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their tools, but their ability to use those tools in ways that defy prediction. "Send to all ships," she ordered. The Ascended came to teach us about advancement. Instead, they learned that true progress isn't about having the most sophisticated technology. It's about understanding all your tools, old and new, and having the creativity to use them in ways your enemies never expect. The human fleet regrouped, their diverse vessels moving into protective formations around their wounded. They had suffered losses, but they had proved something invaluable. That humanity's strength lay not in trying to match the Ascended's technological perfection, but in embracing their own unique approach to advancement. As the last Ascended ships vanished into FTL, Sarah looked around her bridge, at the mix of old and new technology, at the crew who understood how to use every system at their disposal. They had shown the galaxy that sometimes the most primitive solution was the most effective, and that true advancement meant never forgetting the lessons of the past while reaching for the future. The Perseverance's engines hummed steadily as they set course for home, leading a fleet that had changed the course of human history. They had done it not by becoming more like the Ascended, but by remaining defiantly, creatively, unpredictably human.